This has been going on for over a week. What has been overlooked in this story?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually 10 days, Mark, and, the world is seemingly none the wiser. And for someone like me that's been on two boards of inquiry for crash investigation, it's really hard not to start leaning towards the sort of hijack and the sabotage type scenarios and moving away from the mechanical failure or the pilot error, which, everything has to be considered in scenarios such as this.
What leads you to believe that?
I just think if you'd have asked me up until the point where we knew the aircraft did a 140-degree turnabout and heading towards the Malacca Strait, I was sort of leaning towards looking at examples like the Air France 447 crash, where that was ice in the pitot tube, it affected the instruments, disconnected itself from the autopilot.
It took them 2 years to find some of the wreckage.
It absolutely did. It took them 2 years, and what happened was the aircraft developed a catastrophic stall, it lost a lot of lift, the crew didn't know what was going on, no distress call, no emergency code on the transponder, and therefore people were in the dark for 2 years, as you rightly point out, until the black boxes were found. So for me, that was a very viable scenario outcome until we found out the more sort of sinister evidence of the aircraft actually taking a 140-degree turn from the South China Sea and heading over towards the Indian Ocean. And that, to me, was the moment when I thought, right, there's something untoward going on here.
Let's talk about the emergency response that was taken by the Malaysian and Vietnamese air traffic officials when the squawk, that's the code with the aircraft's position, was lost on the transponder.
Yeah, I mean, the transponder does three things. It gives you your position through a unique identification code. It's a 4-digit code. It gives altitude through the mode Charlie, and then it also gives the TCAS, which is the traffic collision avoidance system. Yeah. So it's an incredibly important piece of kit on these airlines. It's never turned off. And the reasons it's never turned off is because that piece of kit alone is responsible for identifying aircraft during transoceanic flights. And the reason for that is primary radar. You lose primary radar about 30 minutes crossing the coast into a transoceanic flight. So the transponder is the only method where air traffic controllers around the world can actually see the aircraft with the unique identification codes on. So
is this information, is it streaming live?
The transponder squawk is absolutely, so you'll know the position of the aircraft. Now, as it happens, when aircraft get to 30 minutes outside of the coast, they all squawk 2000 on transoceanic flights. So you'll have a number of aircraft going up and down an airway across an ocean, which will be squawking 2000 at various altitudes, and they're separated through various Mach numbers that they're told to fly. Okay. So it's all procedural based. It's not radar based at all.
Communications occurring between Malaysian civilian and military air traffic. What do we know so far?
Yeah, and this to me is the area that we've still got a big void of information on. If you look at the point at which the aircraft turned about and headed towards the Malacca Strait, it was just before entering Vietnamese airspace. Now, this is critical because it will be a handover from Malaysian airspace, Malaysian authorities, to Vietnamese authorities. And what the Vietnamese authorities would have been asking the Malaysian 370 to do is put a unique identification on the squawk, so 3721, identify it, clear it into the airspace, and continue it en route Beijing. The transponder was turned off before that handover happened, and so what I would like to see a little bit more of is what emergency procedures were taken by the Malaysian air traffic authorities and the Vietnamese air traffic authorities to try and ascertain what happened to the aircraft when the transponder was turned off, because it will have disappeared off primary radar.
Is there anything that would have alerted other sovereign radar systems? Is there something that kicks in where they start sending off alarms?
Well, other sovereign radar systems generally have what's called an IAD. So if you look at Iran, they've got a very sophisticated IADS, which is a integrated air defense system. And what that is it's a load of radars all connected up, both civilian and military, and if they get any sort of aircraft crossing the sovereign territory and they're not aware of it, i.e. if the transponder's turned off, then they'll all start talking to each other, and if the sovereign territory has what's called a quick reaction alert fighter capability, they'll get some F-16s or whatever they've got, air defense, they'll come up, they'll have a look at it, they'll interrogate it, and they'll make sure that obviously it's not a 9/11 scenario that's about to occur.
Michael, before I let you go, I have to ask you, what are some of the socioeconomic factors at play here, particularly as relates to Malaysia?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, I don't think we can apply that template in this case. You know, we talk about socioeconomic factors when it comes to Lebanon and the Middle East. Malaysia's economy is doing really well. It's a high to middle income economy. It's actually one of only 13 countries that's achieved a 7% GDP growth rate 25 consecutive years in a row, from 1967 to 1997. And also it's managed to reduce its poverty household line from 50% in the 1960s down to 2% now. So in terms of its economy, it's doing very well, and I don't think we can really look to socio-economic factors in terms of the terrorism piece for answers as to why this might have happened.